let me know in the group. Please let me know in the group chat if I go out for any reason, okay? Some of you will remember me from our last gathering and from conferences past. My name is Melinda Cooper. I'm a project manager who supports the conference as a co-organizer and helps to facilitate the conversations in this network. Thank you all for joining us, Programming in Prisons During a Pandemic. This is being recorded, and we've asked that you turn off your sound and video unless you're speaking. Oh. We're going to share airtime and be brief and specific. We will listen for understanding. Another term that was brought to my attention, that is reflective listening, which I also love. Critique ideas, not people, of course. Whatever happens in the Zoom stays in the Zoom, much like Vegas. Explore unconventional approaches, new conditions, demand new solutions. Our panel conversation was hosted by Karen Ann Daniels, Director of Mobile Unit at the Public Theater, and it can be viewed via YouTube. We're also going to read of what went down on our call. And if you didn't get a chance to catch it, you can follow up later if you like, screen it with your family while watching popcorn, go crazy. Okay, I'll pass this over to Karen Ann.
Hi, everybody. Good evening, good afternoon if you're West Coast like me. I'm so excited to have this second part of our conversation now with all of you here live. We are joined again today by Schisgall-Currier from Marin Shakespeare, Tommy Demenkoff, who's from the New York City Department of Corrections, Rich Loya from Actors Gang, Rowan MacKenzie, who's the founder of Shakespeare UnBard, and also the artistic director of the Gallows Field Players and Emergency Shakespeare. And then Frannie Shepherd Bates from Shakespeare in Prison at Detroit Public Theater. And hello, everyone. Welcome, and thank you for coming back and spending some time with us again. Awesome. Couple of quick things I thought I would share with you all. Some of the takeaways that we had. Actually, Melinda, can you pull that back up for me? Apologize. We have that last slide there.
Can you see it?
I don't see it. So that's okay. You know what? I probably have it here. No worries. Sorry, everybody. So oops. I guess I don't have it. We'll just continue on.
I got you.
Oh, there it goes. Yay. Okay, wonderful. Sorry about that. I closed it out because I thought I was going to see it up there.
I don't know why it went away. Sorry about that, guys.
No, you're totally fine. All right, if you could go to the next slide, that'd be great. Awesome. So some of the big takeaways from the call, you know, the whole impetus for this, again, was sort of looking at how we could be responsive for the network in this moment and thinking about how we all are operating in our programming, and if in new ways, what ways can we operate still during this time? And then, you know, what are those challenges that we may have faced and found solutions to, which is why we have this great panel group with a variety of different sort of challenges and solutions. And in some cases, you know, things that were foundational to their program that actually became absolutely vital in this moment. So what are some of the mechanisms by which those things are being administered? Some things have been analog, some things are digital, depending on where you find yourself and in the system that you are working within. There's some really neat opportunities within those. And then how do we settle into this new normal? I mean, it feels like there is no such thing as a new normal. New normal feels like every other week right now. But how do we pivot? How do we respond when we are faced with these challenges? How can we continue to refine what we do? And then how will it inform who we become in the future when we find ourselves outside of this situation? So I'm going to now ask each of our panelists just to kick us off, just one question. And when we did that discussion last week, that you all watched, what was something you were left thinking about after we had our conversation? So we'll have each person actually go ahead and answer that question. And yeah. So let me start with Lesley. Are you there? Oops, okay. Well, then I will roll with Frannie. Do you mind being the first person?
Sure. So I don't know where my notes are from that conversation, but I think something that really resonated with me, as it always was listening to talking about the importance of alumni being involved in the programming, whatever it is, and I think it really, I don't know, it kind of bolstered my feeling about making a commitment to continuing to involve everybody really heavily in what we continue to do. And I always feel really grateful for his perspective on that stuff.
Awesome. Rich, what were you left thinking?
Hi. Actually, it was what you said, Frannie, and also Rowan. If you remember, when I was saying about how it was people like you who help people like me, and then Rowan was quick to say, "Hey, Rich, we're all just people," and so that really stayed with me. It gave me a different meaning of why I'm doing the work, a different perspective. It just reminded me that I can never forget where I was. Real quickly, I want to say to the new viewers, I am an alumni from the Abstinence Prison Project, which means I was formerly incarcerated. I spent 30 years in prison. And so that really stood out to me. And then, Frannie, we've been so focused on trying to keep the men and women connected to our work, we kind of forgot to those that have come home. And so when you said we're focused on the ones that have been released, so I mentioned that to my supervisors, and they're like, "Hey, we need to do that." So that really, like, it helped us as a program to, you know, better help those that have come home. And it's been a handful of them. So that, yeah, that was very helpful to hear.
Thank you, Rich. Rowan.
Yeah, thanks for that, Rich. And I completely stand by what I said, that there is no, you know, people like me or people like you. We're people first and foremost. It doesn't matter what experiences we've had, that's human. I think for me it was really interesting because obviously being based over in the UK, where technology is pretty much a no-no in the prison system completely at the moment. So to hear some of the really great things that are happening in certain prisons over in the US, and some of the innovative ways of dealing with things, and really, I guess, just being able to be connected to people, because actually the feeling of isolation that our men and women are experiencing at the moment is phenomenal. And it's very, very difficult, obviously, for us to keep that connection going. I'm fortunate that I am able to do that with my guys and girls inside. But to then be able to share with other practitioners and just share some of those challenges and understand and acknowledge that actually it's quite difficult for all of us, and we're all trying to find our way through this world that doesn't look like the world looked a few months ago.
Great, thank you, Rowan. And Tommy, if you're back on.
Yeah, I think, whoops, sorry about that. Yeah, hi. I think I've sort of been reflecting some of the stuff from last week and thinking about, you know, since what changes have I seen? What things have evolved, real-time aspect of the work that we do, because that's what everybody is calling and asking me. What's going on now? What's happening now? When are we going back in? And been able to get a time to go back into our jails. We do get to deliver stuff on paper and also our tablet system. So that's how we've been able to engage. But you know, as much as I'm a big fan of what we're out, and the immediate thing of the paper thing that we're all desperately aching for right now, and as I can tell with all my colleagues here, the same. And so we're just counting the days and waiting until we get a green light. But right now, it does not look like we're going to be in for a while.
Thank you. Thank you all. Just for everybody who's waiting for their moment to ask some questions, and let's just get this conversation going. Melinda is going to be actually fielding questions. So if you want to go ahead and put your questions in the chat there, she will be reading through any questions that you have. Feel free to address them to a particular person if so. And she will, if need be, allow you to come on and actually ask the question yourself if the question needs some more context. We're going to try to answer as many questions as possible, of course, and then out of respect for each other, to be as concise as we can be while we're sharing during this time. So I will say, if there's anybody who does have a question that they'd love to kick off after that great intro, I'm going to ask really briefly to Rich just to talk a teeny bit more. The question that I have for you, Rich, is just about getting input from inmates as we are continuing on in the future, and just to talk a little bit. I think you touched on it last time, but just how important and how informative that can be for us. The more of those voices can be included in thinking about how we are pivoting with our work.
Okay. So at the transition home that we work, these are men and women that had just recently come home. So they're still like fresh, institutionalized. I hate to use that term, but it's true in many cases. And so from them, we're able to hear the voices from inside still, because they're still, you know, they're just a week out, 2 weeks out. And so hearing from them, the concerns, it's terrible inside right now. And I mentioned how they're not, the news really reporting everything that's happening inside. And what's sad is that if an inmate has no support, has no family, has nobody to make noise when they're getting sick, we're not even hearing about it. And that's, we just got a card that we received from one of the prisons, Kern Valley State Prison. It's up north. We received the card from in there, and about 18 or 20 guys signed this card, and everyone seems to be concerned about us, because we're, for a lot of them, we're like the closest thing to family. We go visit them every 6 weeks. And so us not being able to go back inside, you know, part of their family is missing in their lives. And so it's important that I mentioned, Tommy, I'm sorry, you mentioned, Tommy, that you guys haven't heard going back in either. I know for us, it's not going to be till next year sometime. That's what we're hearing. Sad to announce, I heard from 2 of the prisons. So for them to go outside, they're asking them to sign a consent form. I don't know if that's legal or legal. CDC, the way they run their stuff is crazy. To hear that they're doing that, it's hard inside right now. So anything we can get to them, writing to them, sending them material, that's what we're doing, just so they know that we're here for them. As soon as they let us in, we'll be there.
Well, thank you so much. Let's see if we have any questions. Not yet. So, oh, hello, Kira. All right, I'm just going to read it out loud since it flashed in front of me. Kira says she's affiliated with 10,000 Things, and she's working as part volunteer, part freelancer to build theater programs in a maximum security facility for women for about 4 years before COVID. Using this time when we can't get inside to coalesce exercises from teaching artists, so we will have a shared resource. We're a small organization without lots of funding, and it would be incredibly useful if there was a shared resource for approaches, ideas, teaching ideas for students who are incarcerated. And let's see, she's thinking of that arts learning website, but for what we are all doing. Is there such a place to share teaching exercises, approaches to DOE, staff, all the analog exercises? Could larger organizations help mentor smaller organizations as well to help as mentors? That's a fantastic question. And I think something that we've actually heard, had lots of questions about, I think. I'd love to actually just throw together, Tommy, can I throw this one at you to start? I just think you have an incredible resource and a way that you work in New York.
The way that we've been training new artists, fold up in a second, because the question's great and is definitely something that we need. There's a lot of resources for theatricians out there that we all know of, but is there a comprehensive place to go for this specific work? What we've learned is because it is such specific work and the learning curve is huge, like this, that we found the best thing to do is we align new artists with artists that have been in the system for a long time, basically like an apprenticeship, but like a mentorship type of arrangement. And we find that that's probably the most successful way bringing people into the system to teach. As far as resources go and a training ground, yeah, it's been my dream for the longest time to create an academy or a training component for what we do to train artists in our system. It's been very difficult. I've been a provider for over 20 years in various systems, mostly New York, but I've been with the DOC for 3 years in this position. And since COVID hit, you know, it was really on our desktop to do something similar to this, a more robust training program, but yet we're not able to do that at this point. But I think that looking to universities, to some of the conservatories that feed in and the nonprofits that feed into this work, I think somebody needs to really look at an opportunity to be able to create some sort of a training ground or some sort of a resource academy. I mean, that would be my hope.
Fantastic. I have thought about this too a lot, just that it feels like there could be maybe a more considered to really build like a track, even just thinking about, you know, about schools and academic programs and how this work is considered, you know, part of what is possible for an artist to do in the world. And of course, we all know like a very necessary thing. So it'd be really fantastic. Just a couple of comments that are happening in the chat room. So that, Kira, would you be willing to start? Oh, Google Doc, that would be fantastic to share teaching exercises. Calls to continue sharing direct resources and training. And then let's see, oh, toolkits. So keep tracking in the chat there. There's some great ideas. Do any of our other panelists have any other thoughts that they'd like to share about this?
Okay, well, I will. I'm not a panelist, but I have a thought. But because mentorship is so essential, can you guys hear me? Because mentorship is so essential, I would love to see our network create some sort of, in the future, some sort of mentorship, formalized mentorship structure around this question. But I think the key is that we mentor each other. There's no like, you know, learned person, like we all have something that we can teach each other, you know, whereas like there might be a more experienced practitioner who has a lot that they can teach a less experienced practitioner, but a less experienced practitioner has a worldview that is really important to the more experienced practitioner as we work to being fully multi-generational and inclusive in the space. That's just something I would like to think a little bit more about. Maybe if there's anybody else who is really in, shoot me an email and we can start spitballing ideas around together or something.
Yeah, Melinda, if I could just come in off the back of that, and I completely agree. And I think it's really, really important. One of the things that I'm hoping, fingers crossed at the moment, because obviously things are not working exactly as they should be, but one of the things that I've managed to get one of the prisons that I work in to agree to is to fund me going in for extra sessions every week to actually build some internal mentorship with some of the serving prisoners. So the idea is that we will have 3 or 4 every week helping me to run a SEC company, with the idea that will be like a shorter program, and we'll get guys engaged for, I don't know, 10, 12 weeks. So it's a bit bittersweet at the moment that got approved, and the prison system themselves actually want to fund it, and they've approved it while I'm outside of the prison and I can't get in. But the idea would be that actually we can do, therefore, mentorship with serving inmates, and these guys are life sentence people, so they're going to be in there for a long time, but with the idea that hopefully we could then expand that out as they get moved out into different categories, and that they could then take that with them and take that skill set. So who knows how successful it's going to be, but as soon as we can get it up and running, we'll be giving it a go.
That's great. And in the chat, y'all, Scott wrote in there about the conference, which of course the sort of education portion has been a very key part of what the conference was developed to do. But I think to the other conversations, you know, this idea of maybe there is a sort of a collective shared resource that can become a sort of a permanent, you know, database of sources that might be something as an entity we could talk about figuring out how to create as part of this network. I think that'd be a really cool thing to do, especially as there are so many people with different levels of experience and different entry points to the work. You know, not everybody comes through it, you know, being, oh, I was an applied theater major or whatever. So I think it'd be really interesting to really figure out how we can get all that information and put it in a place that anybody could reach it. Let's see what else. Any other questions? William James is sharing lesson plans among the local cohorts for visual arts, writing, and music. So that's fantastic. Thank you for that, Tim. All right. See if I missed anything else in here. Very cool. And here would love to meet up with someone as a mentor. So maybe Melinda, one for us, an action item is figuring out how to get that mentorship conversation moving after this.
Great, we can do that.
Love it. Mm-hmm.
I love it. Well, I would also just love to hear if folks don't have questions, if they have reflections on either anything that they've heard or that they're experiencing in their own programs, because I know we have a lot of practitioners on this call too. And while we're all perspective and experiences in the moment, we'd love to hear from you too of how this conversation makes you think about your own programs, or if there's something that this conversation is missing that you want to throw out there. We'd love to hear it.
I just really quick want to throw out, in any kind of training, resource mentoring program we're looking at, the more we can involve alums of these programs, like in a way they should be leading it. I know we've made massive adjustments in anything from just the way I learned an exercise in college, to the way we run our entire program, to the way we interview new facilitators. Like the hiring process was developed by. So I think that making really sure the leadership always is, you know, including people who've been through the programs and have perspective on it, that those of us who come in from the outside we can't possibly have.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. I love that you've standardized that into your practices. So light to that. And what do you think? You had a question from earlier that you shared with Scott and I on our pre-call. Something about creative, something or other. Let's know.
Yeah, you know, I think the question was just thinking, I was thinking more future going. Everybody's, you know, in different places, different size organizations, different experiences and stuff, but that just what does the future look like coming out of this, right? I feel like we're all probably have spent a lot of time, actually I shouldn't say we, I'm going to speak for me. I I have spent a lot of time trying to sort of pivot in the moment, which is a big piece of why I'm in this conversation with you all. I was supposed to start a program right the week we went on to, I keep calling lockdown for us now. It just, I've changed the term to apply to everyday people outside. So anywho, when we went into lockdown, I had to cancel the plans for the program, a new program that I was about to launch in New York. And that, of course, was not, not entirely devastating, because I've done the work before and these things happen and you're like, you think you're going to start and then you don't, and then you do, and then you have to stop again, right? But, we've entered this time where as access to programming has completely, come to a halt with our partners, and that they themselves are having, I think, issues internally, of course, in addition to the fact that there's no programming going on. How could I continue to try to serve this facility? And I think also knowing that they have anything like theater-based or that like this there. So I'm constantly, I think every other month I have completely reinvented my program and still not have been able to launch it yet, right? Going from an in-person program to a correspondence course, and to now pivoting to purely just videos that have really no interaction. They're going to be just right now outward going with some kind of maybe activity that's aligned with it, but I may not see any of that work. I may not be able to have a conversation with any of those people that are participating. And so when I come out of this and hearing things like what Rich talked about, like, hey, we may not get in there for like another year. I mean, which is nuts. It's crazy to me that this is the place that we all find ourselves in. And so I guess I'm just interested in what is the future? Like, what are the things that you all have been learning during this time you think are changing the way you're thinking and approaching the work, waiting for tomorrow to come, right? So I think that's really the question. What is this process of radical imagination that the moment is inspiring us to have?
Radical imagination,
I think
was definitely the term. Go ahead, Tommy.
Feeding off of what I talked about that's all right. Feeding off of what I talked about last week, I think that, the pivot that we made, and that as I consult with people around the country, other correctional, hear the challenges they have, but also the resources that they have in place. One of the things is that during this time, whether you're programming for a tablet or you're driving paper through gates, or I know some of my friends upstate are getting cassette tapes into some of the prisons because that's the system that they have. Whatever you're doing, what I'm trying to do with my team and my internal faculty is think of, if and when we do get to go back in, how will this impact the work that we're going to do once we get back in? It has to be a table setter. It has to be that allows us to feed off of it and build off it. It can't be something that just sort of puts everything on pause and we're going to do this until we can come back in. I think the advantage is just an example for us with the tablets. We're working with several performances, bringing those performances onto the tablet and then extending curriculum around those performances on the tablet, so that when we do go back in, we will have a Shakespeare tour coming through. We may say, take a look at these 2 or 3 videos discussing the text, discussing acting, discussing speech before you see the production. We're going to have that now on a tablet. We didn't have that before. So we're going to have that as an additional resource. And one of the things I'm doing is, as I decide on things that go on the tablet or go on the paper, the question I always ask myself is, how is this going to resonate when we're back in? I don't want just to be a pause. I want this to be something we're building towards, so that we have a wave coming, so that when we go back in, we've got a massive resources to draw from to be able to and enhance it even further.
I think absolutely great, Tommy. From my point of view, we're sadly not in a position where technology is going to happen, I don't think, in any foreseeable future in the UK system. But one of the things that I've been doing, asking if I could share the link to some of the materials that we've been producing. So each week I'm producing 6 packs of materials that go out to various places. But building from that, I've had conversations with a couple of working with like emerging personality disorder units and some of the psychological units within the prison system around actually what can we do to make this become part of the business as usual. So how can we make accessible, we're looking at whether we can produce some kind of workbook or something for people who are maybe in their cells a lot more, who are maybe isolated, who age in a group environment, but we can get some of those creative activities as a, I guess, almost like a precursor to them involving themselves in something that's group led. So they're very preliminary conversations at the moment, but I think the idea is that we don't, this isn't an interim thing that we do in the meantime. This is actually, what can we learn from it, and what can we take away? Because we've got a lot of people, certainly in our system, who are self-isolated, who choose to be behind their door for a lot of the time for various reasons. And if we can engage some of those people, and we've had some initial feedback that it is starting to engage with them, it's giving them families and so on. And how do we then sort of capitalise on that and expand on that? And the one thing I'm struggling with at the moment is getting consistent and good feedback and being able to discuss it with people inside, because obviously we're in a weird position at the moment, but I'm hoping that we're building the network over here that will allow that to happen once I can get back in.
I'd like to radically imagine the question in a slightly different direction, because I think all of this is important, and those of us who are doing this work on the inside, I think we work so hard at that. Right now, while we can't be in there, it's really painful, and there's so much we can be doing out here to support that work, not just for our own programs, but for each other. My question at the end of the last panel was, how can we find funding for these programs when we're not inside? And part of that is not just compiling like practical resources in terms of what kind of exercises do we do and things like that, but like, what kind of data do you have? You know, what studies are you aware of that support your work that might support mine? How do you write your grants? You know, like, because if we're not able to do stuff that is really performance-based, like we're looking at a lot of more humanities funding, and we've had a lot of success getting funding in the humanities, which I think is it's not intuitive when you're doing a theater program, because we don't know what it's going to be like when we get back in. And for those of us who can't get materials in, we can develop models that we think might work, but supporting that and saying, this is the value of this programming, whatever it looks like. Here are these like jazzy materials I have to back up the work that we have done in our program, and here's what this program over here has done, and would this be a good idea? You know, here's this study, and this, you know, that really supports the people on the inside too. While we can't be there physically with them, you know, we can be working just as hard out here on all that stuff, I think. I know.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that's actually a really important point to make, Frannie, that I was actually thinking as already was talking about data and surveys and studies, and you know, with I've had this conversation with Scott a little bit about you know, who are the people studying the work that we're doing, who are, you know, sort of tracking the efficacy, so that when it does come down to finding funding and in a more consistent way, that we have the evidence we need to sort of back up the claims, in addition to also now thinking about how that dovetails into this kind of about mentorship, right? That some people don't have maybe enough people. I mean, they're doing the work, they're inside teaching, they're developing the curriculum, but they're also writing the grants, right? Like there's different layers to how each entity is operating. And I think that mentorship moment comes into play, where we might be able to a resource to each other, especially when we're talking about sort of the scale of our work. You know, some organizations may have more access or easier access to funding, and not necessarily have yet the skills baked in internally, right, to actually execute the work well from the get-go. And I think that, I wonder if there are some relationships, some pairings that could be made in this effort to help each other out. So we have a couple of questions. Let me see here. Okay, so William James employed some folks to mentor new programs by doing on-site visits. That's cool. And see, oh, Precious. Would this be a moment to extend that programming to families that are impacted by incarceration? So that's a really great question. Anybody feeling like answering that one?
Can I actually take a moment to add a little bit more to what so I think as I'm listening and hearing, I work at the Public Theater in the mobile unit with Karen Ann. I'm in the same boat where we were on that week of launching that program, and that program did not happen, and now we are repurposing every month to make it as accessible as possible. But as I'm listening, I am kind of going back to this moment of and please excuse me because I just learned this term today. I am thinking in rough or speaking in rough draft, meaning that my thoughts are coming together while I'm speaking. So it may take me a while to get to my point. But what I'm thinking is like, we don't necessarily have that access to be in the space with our participants right now, but I'm not, 100% sold on the idea that somehow families don't have or are not able to still have some level of contact with the people that are already incarcerated. So if we are extending that program to the outside instead of doing with them via Zoom, if we had the opportunity, and then they're able to write in their letters or on their phone calls like, hey, I did this activity today, and I wonder if you can now do it too, since we can't actually be the conduit of that activity. I'm feeling like just because the programming can't happen in the state that it's happening, and yes, there are pivots, there are also ways to get inside while continually doing the work. And those that are incarcerated, their families are also going through that incarceration as well, and they need that programming too. So I just offer that is that something, a way that people can be thinking of, I don't have to completely stop my program, but maybe this is a point for me to redirect who my programming is impacting so that it is essentially still get to those that are impacted by incarceration. Okay.
I think that's a really cool idea.
I think one of the thrilling things that I discovered, one of the thrilling things that I discovered with family engagement is that from time to time, I'll bring in musical artists to perform in the jails. Just as an example, like the Chelsea Symphony will come in and play in a housing unit, and immediately all of the detainees will run to the phones, pick up the phones and hold the phones up so that their families can hear the same concert with them. And so when we bring in artists, or when in this time we're sending in paper, or whether it's on a tablet, what I'm also including is share this with your family. We look for ways in the curriculum to strategize for them to find a connection with a child or a loved one or a parent or an extended family member, and to use whatever we're giving them, whether it's a writing assignment, whether it's a reading assignment, whether it's something in a origami challenge, whatever it is, but to have that conversation with family. And that's the first thing on paper. And of course, in all the tablets, what we decided to do is the content that was coming from the outside, a nonprofit created a social media sort of a community for it, so that there's a community of artists that are donating content. And this is also being shared with family members. So the family members on the outside can see the same content that is happening on the tablets on the inside. This happens with the paper too, because we encourage the families to, the detainees to share what they're seeing on the activities and the exercises, to also share those over the phone with their family, or to send them home as well, so that there's some sort of a connection. We do a lot of programming where we engage with family, and so to find ways and strategize to find ways to get the family connected to what we're actually doing now. And these are some of the ways.
Frannie, we were making a comment.
I was saying that that's a really, really cool idea. In Michigan, I highly doubt it would fly. The fact that we're allowed to work with our program alums the way that we are. It was a shock when I proposed it, and they were like, yeah, all of this. We don't want to make any of this to your proposal. I was like, seriously? I don't think they let us work with families, but I think that if you're in a place and, you know, working with a department that would approve of something like that, I think that's a really rad idea.
If I may add to Franny's comment, this is Ashley Lucas. I'm also in Michigan with the Prison Creative Arts Project. I have a feeling that our prison system would sort of be okay if you worked with families away from the people inside, but the idea of working with families in connection with their loved ones immediately, Michigan is super paranoid about overfamiliarity, and we do have contact with people's families at PCAP, and there is a certain level of mushiness there because families call us about the artwork that we've displayed for their loved ones and whatever, but we haven't done really official programming with the families, in part because our volunteer status is always kind of on the line. If they think that we're a conduit between people and their families, they start trying to shut us out. But it might be that a separate program specifically for the children of people in prison or something like that was deemed not as a way to connect families to their loved ones, but to provide a separate sphere of programming might be possible.
That's a great idea. The idea of finding other people then maybe to partner with, so that you are thinking about that like in a holistic sort of way. Rich, I think you had something you wanted to jump in with.
Yeah, I absolutely love all your thoughts and ideas that you're willing to try, right, to keep your students inside connected with your work. But one of the things that really worked well in our program was they understand that we can go in, and right now with the videos, letters, material is the only way we can reach to them, right? But what about asking them, what do you need right now? While all this craziness is happening, what do you need right now for you to continue to participate? What do you need right now for you to feel safe during the work still? However it is. I remember when they asked us, our group, what is it you need to feel, to participate? What is it you feel you need to feel safe? What is it you feel so you can have fun in here? So right now, I would say just asking them, what do you need right now? They're smart, believe me. They understand what we can and can't do. Just asking them and hearing from them, and then maybe it'll give you something else that you can do for them. So I would say, ask your students, what do they need right now under these crazy and unusual times we're going through? And you hear it. It's important that their voices are heard, right? So I would say ask them.
It always comes down to like the simplest simplest thing that we tend to like jump over when we are talking about like all of the moving pieces in our minds, and we get so used to sort of being in our job role. And it's funny you say that, because I've even in my own job separately from this have had that moment where I was like, well, maybe we should just ask, where we just go, oh yeah, right, the people that we're wanting to do so much for, and very oftentimes we skip that step, which really should be a beginning, the place we leapfrog from, so.
That's certainly been something that I've been doing with my guys. So I'm fortunate that the prisons have agreed to me writing to them every week and then them right back out as well, which I fully expected would be an absolute. I was kind of like, can I write a kind of generic letter in? And they were like, yeah, that's fine. What, they can write back to me? Yeah, it's fine. And you can write back personal letters. And it's like, wow, I really wasn't expecting that. So it's been interesting, because I've been on a massive learning curve over the last 13, 14 weeks. And some of the stuff that I was kind of like, oh yeah, this will work really well. And then people have written and gone, actually, I really didn't get that exercise, but I really like this. And I've now got guys writing back out to me, telling me what we should put in the next week's activity packs and what the activities should look like. And designing stuff to go in them, and writing poetry to go in them, and writing reflections that go back out to all the prisons. And I'm like, absolutely. If I can get the ability to get their work out there, that's got to be better. And also, you know, so I've had 3 letters arrive today, talking about what's working for them and the feeling of connectedness and that feeling of knowing that actually we're still part of, I think one of them, we're part of this amazing thing. So I'll get through it because I have this before. So for me, that's been really important. And again, kind of a huge learning curve as to what is working, what isn't. And often what I was thinking, oh yeah, they'll really enjoy this. They've gone, no, that's not worked for us. But we really love that bit over there. And can we have more of it? So it's like, yeah, let's develop what works then. And I guess just not having a kind of a set agenda and just going with the flow and trying to pick up on what they're feeling. And kind of reading between the lines of what they write back to me to kind of go, okay, so is that because that's where your head's at in terms of your mental health this week, or is that actually a general feeling around how that's working or not?
I just had a question and it went out of my brain. Oh, I know what it is. I actually remembered what I asked on the video finally from last week, which I guess, you know, we find ourselves in a collective cultural moment that has gone, you know, global with examining and looking at our practices. And so I'm wondering if practices start as human beings, and then what is the relationship to that in the work that we do. And so I'm really curious if y'all are having any thoughts about how this sort of cultural human moment that we find ourselves in terms of dealing with race, knowing that the work we do and the people that we are working with are predominantly Black and brown folks, but yet, you know, you can just look on this call and see that that's not the people who are actually going inside. So I'd love just to hear if there's any critical thoughts that are starting to sort of happen in terms of the way you're working or the way you want to work going forward that have very specifically due to these ideas around race, around privilege, around white supremacy, and working especially with Shakespeare, but just in general.
I want to jump on that. Karen, can you hear me?
Yeah, go for it. Go for it.
Sorry. It goes back to what I said last week, your alumni, because, you know, you're unfortunately, you're talking about Black and brown. And so, like I mentioned, when the Actors Gang came to our yard, it was 3 white people and an English woman. And we were like, what is this? And so having those that been inside that can relate, right, to the lifestyle they grew up in, the amount of years that they spend inside, unfortunately decades for some of us, and using your alumni, if you can get them back inside to go in with you, because it's one thing to hear that, and I'll use lifers especially, to hear that, lifers are getting out and coming back in. That's one thing to hear, but to see them, I cannot tell you how impactful that is, how much it raises hope, how much it inspires the men and women. So I would say if you can get them in, get them back in there to work with you, partnership.
Thank you. Anybody else have any other thoughts? Lesley, are you here now?
Hello, I'm here. I apologize for being late. And I just need to acknowledge personally, I'm just working today from a place of rage and sorrow at the situation at San Quentin State Prison, where the CDCR decided to transfer 120 men from a prison that was rife with COVID. They tested those men 3 to 4 weeks before they were transferred, put them back in the general population, sent them to San Quentin. By the time they got there, 10% of them tested positive for COVID, and now it's in the general population where there were 0 at San Quentin. And over the weekend, it was just horrendous. It's just a terrible situation there right now. And I'm sorry, I just need to say that for my own mental health.
Thank you for sharing that. It's important to hear for us all to know.
And our state senator said that this was completely avoidable, which it was. It was just a absolute stupidity on how this was handled, that unfortunately resulted in many people getting sick, and it's really hard to take because it was avoidable. But I do want to respond to your question about fear specifically. There's a lot of what I call unconscious racism, sexism, and anti-Semitism in Shakespeare. Shakespeare tosses things out sometimes that are racist, sexist, and anti-Semitic. And so it gives us an opportunity to talk about those things, to talk about the unconscious racism and other isms in our life that we deal with, and to become more aware of them. This is one of the things about fear that I think makes Shakespeare a great learning tool. Shakespeare gives us an opportunity to talk about a lot of different things. And I will say that I think it's really important for organizations that have a lot of white teaching artists to do ongoing training in making sure that teaching artists are culturally aware, and also aware, trauma aware. And we try to do that on an ongoing basis. One of the things that we've been able to do during this downtime, this pause, is to have one of our teaching artists take a course on cultural training that she's going to be able to work better with all of us moving forward in the future. So racism and trauma are, absolutely interrelated in this country. The trauma of growing up, or the trauma of growing up overly policed, the mental and physical trauma that just goes hand in hand with racism. And so making sure that our teaching artists, especially when we are not like Richard said, formerly incarcerated people, just making sure that people have an awareness of that and practice in talking about it is really super important. But I do think Shakespeare gives us a lot of pathways into that. And
wonderful, thank you.
Sorry,
go ahead.
Oh yeah, speaking specifically to Shakespeare, saying yes and to everything that Lesley just said, there's also allowing for that kind of radical imagination about Shakespeare. People take it. So like and there's video of this on our website if you want. Like when we worked on Richard III in the women's prison, and now that we're working on it to make, collaborating on our critical edition, a big part of the critical analysis that group did and is continuing to do was really rooted in the woman who ended up playing Richard feeling a kinship with him, because she feels like a lot of his actions, his anger, come out of feeling like he has been looked down on and mistreated because of his deformity, which she equated to being mistreated because of her skin color. And so she really found a lot of like, we don't approve of what he did necessarily, but like, here's how I relate to him, and here's how I pull my personal experience out and work it out here. And it makes sense. And even, too, finding a lot of things that folks need to work through. One of our alums the other day, when I was saying, I don't know how I feel about funding for our program right now. And she said, now is the time, because your side of it to help with the healing. And part of that is allowing people to pull what they're going to pull out of the material, even if it seems, radical. And so I think that a lot of the work that needs to be done is just, it's there, and folks will find what they need to find in there.
Thank you, Frannie. Thank you to everybody. We only have a couple minutes, and I want to just give Scott a minute to talk about what's coming up. But I want to just say my thanks to Tommy, to Rich, to Frannie, to Rowan, to Lesley for being here twice now with us and having this conversation. I'm so happy to have all of you as part of this larger network, and to everybody that's been today. That's a big reason, again, why we are doing these conversations, is to try to hold space and use this time to become resources for each other and to, dig into what's going on in the chat, which is, to figure out what we don't know that we need to know, and, and all of that. So thank you all for your participation and your presence. And I am going to Belinda for helping with all of this and the PowerPoint and all the things that she does on behalf of this programming. So Scott, I'm gonna hand it off to you.
Hey, thank you, Karen Ann. Thanks, everyone. Beautiful discussion, beautiful panel as well. It's an honor to have you guys all gathered to talk about this, and I can't thank you enough for that. So first off, I want to give a pitch to July 13th. Will be the second in our series of anti-racism for white folks. This time, same place, 5 p.m. on Monday, July 13th. We're meeting every 4 weeks to continue those discussions forward and how we transform ourselves from being not racist to, sorry, I got a dog here, not racist to anti-racist, yeah? So please join us, and I'll be sending out definitely some reminders about that coming up. But next week, next Monday, Precious Gay Wilson Gay from the Public Theater has moderated another beautiful panel on radical self-care. And that link is now live. I think you probably got it in the email today. I also posted it into the Facebook group too. That's a beautiful conversation with Dawn Stern and Stefan Wolford from Decruit, Nia Wilson from Spirit House Inc. in North Carolina, and Soraya Keating from Marin Shakespeare Company, just discussing how not how we're giving self-care practices to our students and our participants, but also to ourselves. And in this time of lockdown and everything else, there's some really beautiful words about breath, because it all comes back down to the breath, and as well as a lot of other interesting information there. So please join us next Monday from 5 to 6. So with that in mind, also too, Karen Ann and I have also been talking about, should we be doing Shakespeare? Should we? This is a larger, broader question with all the isms that are contained in there. So that's a conversation that we're hoping to bring to you in the not too distant future as well. So I think that this ends the formal part of our Q&A. We're going to hold this space for at least a half hour if folks want to just keep with us and have more of an informal conversation. You're more than welcome to do so. But if you need to log off, we get it. And thanks for joining us today. I'm going to pause that.